Well, one thing I kind of wanted to talk about today, partially because I think it's just an interesting thing to discuss, and also partially because um, I'm going to be starting a campaign this week. Well, character creating a campaign this week with some local friends,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them have never played before. So, on the off chance they wanted to tune in, I wanted to talk about character classes and maybe races a bit too, about what we think
Yeah.
are the best ones for first time players or are good ways to introduce for first time players.
Speaking of which, before we jump into this, and I don't think I
Yes.
mentioned it at the beginning, you guys should check out Inner Worlds.
Yes.
They they also talk about character creation in some of their episodes.
Hmm.
Thought I'd segue that on in
Yeah.
there.
I was watching, well, I was listening to a bunch of their videos literally just the other day, and I was unable to really follow everything because there is kind of quite a bit of stuff that I think you need to be kind of sitting down and watching it to see. So I do intend to rewatch it all more closely here in the near future, when
When
I
we
have the time. Maybe I'll do a little bit of it tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah, and
Um,
it'll be in our featured channels, so
yep.
be sure to check them out.
I definitely would recommend it. Even just the little bit I was able to glean from listening, I enjoyed it, so I would definitely recommend it. Um,
They're like the Guild, but Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah,
So Inner Worlds, when you get big, say hi to the Critical Crew for us.
yeah, definitely. Invite us to the Christmas party.
Yeah, I want to go.
um,
So yeah,
yeah. So
back
go
to
ahead.
you building your character.
Yeah.
We're
So character classes,
Yeah,
right? Um, there are so many character classes in Dungeons and Dragons.
there's
Um,
13, I think.
yeah. Why don't we just like go down the list alphabetically and just kind of talk about what we think for with what our limited knowledge may be about the classes, having not played some of them, what we think the benefits are and the pros and cons for a first time player. So I think the first one, if we're going alphabetical, is
Artificer?
Artificer.
I don't
Um,
know a whole lot about Artificer.
so I built one the other day when we did some character building, just kind of randomly, and um, they're they're not as complex as I initially thought, but I feel like they're a little bit more gimmicky than a lot of other classes in the fact that each one of their subclasses very significantly changes how the class functions.
I like that though.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that, but I think that might be a bit much for a first time player, right?
Hmm.
Because you want to kind of be able to pick a class, and sure, you're going to pick your subclass later, but you don't want it to change the entire way you play because you're still trying to learn how to play the game. So I feel like Artificer isn't a good choice for a first time player. Not that I would stop a first time player from playing it. I would definitely support them in it, and I would try and I would help them to the best of my ability to be able to play that character well if that was what they wanted to do. But I think if someone's just kind of looking at it and not knowing what they want to be and not having necessarily a super in-depth concept, I think I would probably push them away from Artificer a little bit. Um,
It feels like Artificer has to make use of the downtime a lot in order to actually function.
they're all about building those magical items and stuff like that. So there's a lot more like, yeah, downtime management and a lot of planning involved because you have to be like, which magical item is best? Who should I give it to? How's it going to
All
benefit?
right.
You know?
So, weird character concepts? I've already come up with something for
Okay.
Artificer.
Okay.
All I need is for an Artificer to be able to cast Tensor's floating disc. Because,
I don't know if that's in their normal spell list,
well,
but
they could take magic. I don't know if they could take Magic Initiate or something.
is it a first level spell? Then they could get it with Magic Initiate.
Um,
Um,
what is it? It is a level 1 conjuration. Yes.
so yeah, they would definitely be able to get it with Magic Initiate. I'm just gonna
Okay.
go ahead and keep talking about your concept. I'm just gonna see if
All
it's in their
right.
spell list already.
So Green Goblin from Spider-Man.
So he rides around on the disc.
Uh-huh.
I like it. Okay, so it is not in the Artificer spell list. So you would have to take Magic Initiate to get it. But that's not that big of a deal. So if you did Variant Human, get a feat right away at first level. Take Magic Initiate so that you have Tensor's Floating Disc. Variant Human works for Green Goblin anyways.
Because he is a human variant.
Would you go the Artillerist subclass, which gets the cannons, or would you go the Power Armor subclass?
I
don't think his armor is really powered. I think it's more of just like a costume, right?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Artificer subclasses, so probably Artillerist so far.
Artillerist gets arcane cannons, and I think they can throw them and make them explode.
So yeah, that.
So I feel like Artillerist would probably make the most sense.
All right.
We might have to build that character down the road.
So I'm going to try to guess to remember these in alphabetical order, and you gotta tell me if I've gotten the next one.
Okay.
Barbarian.
Barbarian is the next one.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So.
What do you think about barbarians?
Beginner friendly?
What do you think?
I mean, I would like to rage.
Yeah. I think barbarians are pretty straightforward. Raging is their big gimmick, but it's not. You just get a couple of rages per day. You don't have a ton of stuff you have to track. Remembering all of the bonuses you get while raging might be a little bit, but it's not even that much, especially if you start at level 1. So I think it's pretty beginner friendly. I would say it's one of the easier ones to step into. You don't pick a subclass till level 3, so you got some time to kind of figure it out a bit. Most of the subclasses I don't think change it up too much either. You're still going to be raging.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to go into a raging combat. That's going to be your whole thing, regardless of which subclass you pick. So the general play style doesn't really change. And then if for a new player that's wanting to experiment, the Path of Wild Magic gets you a little bit of access to magic, so you can kind of try magic out a little bit with a barbarian. So that's a nice kind of added feature.
I think it would be cool to make a barbarian, like a warforged barbarian, instead of like actual rage. It's just like initiating like combat mode or whatever.
That would be kind of a fun way to play it. We've discussed about having like a campaign where we were all warforged. That would be fun to have one of them that's their thing.
Oh,
maybe you have one of the other ones. One of the other warforged has to like deactivate his safety protocols for him, and that's how he goes into rage or something.
Oh, okay. How about like the plot we're all warforged, okay?
Uh-huh.
Organic life for the most part is just gone. Some big spell plague or something has just wiped everybody out. So it's up to the like a group of warforged to have it in their protocol to like go find some sort of like seed of life vault to restore life to their world. So
it's kind of like what's the game with
Nier Automata?
Yes, Nier Automata. It's a little bit like Nier Automata mixed with like Wall-E.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be kind of cool? So you'd have to like
that would be a really fun campaign.
And so you could like homebrew a bunch of stuff like that pulls from like Mirrodin or something to be like all like metallic and like synthetic life.
Yeah, it wouldn't be too hard to change things into constructs. You could take some inspiration from like Horizon Zero Dawn for
exactly.
Robot enemies. It's funny. I'm referencing none of these games are games that I have played, but I know of their existence.
Yeah.
That would be a fun campaign. I would super be on board for a campaign like that.
All right. Or it could be like a one shot or something.
Yeah, or even a one shot. Yeah. But yeah, so Barbarian I think is very, very friendly to first time players.
All right. So next, I'm guessing Cleric.
No, you are forgetting the best class in
Bard.
D&D. The Bard.
There's another B. Bard. How could I forget Bard? I have made a Bard before.
I do always jokingly say that bards are the best class in D&D. I think they are the most versatile class in D&D. So if you're not sure what you want to do, a bard is a good option because then you can tailor it to do whatever. If you know what you want to do specifically, there's probably another class that might be able to do it better. Bards are kind of the whole. I mean, they get the ability jack of all trades, which is the whole like master of none, but better than a master of one.
Yeah.
That is the bard.
Like,
Um,
if you want to be College of Swords, just be a rogue.
yeah, exactly. So bards, I think. First of all, I should just right out the bat, I'm going to say any class that's like a full fledged caster is going to sit lower for me as far as being a good option for a first time player because spellcasting adds in a significant layer of complexity to
Oh,
a character. It's not that bad, but it can be very intimidating for a first time player.
yeah.
Um, to obviously now starting off at low level, you're not going to have so many spells and spell slots that it's that bad. And if you have a good DM, absolutely go after a spellcaster if it's something that appeals to you. But um, if you're a little bit nervous about it, Bard is not the spellcaster that I would recommend for your first character. Um, Now, not that you can't have a very good time with that. Especially if you're someone that has consumed a lot of fantasy media, has played video game RPGs and stuff like that, it's going to be a lot easier to shift into the gameplay of Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not so bad, but
Hmm.
I know we were talking earlier about the differences between the way they prepare spells, right?
Yeah.
And
So
um,
bards only have a limited spell list, right? Like they.
yes, they learn their spells, and I mean they can retrain them every time they level up slightly. You can like drop one and learn a different one, but they just have their list of spells that they know.
Okay.
So, um,
So, but speaking of different ways to prepare spells, the next one should be cleric.
um,
I think cleric can
I think
potentially be beginner friendly for a
I think
spellcaster.
I think cleric is more accessible for a spellcaster, because you're gonna kind of hopefully go into it with the mindset of like I'm playing a support character. So if you're wanting to play a support character, and technically you could say this about the bard as well, if you're wanting to play a support character, you're gonna have more of the mindset that's probably gonna be better for picking spells and things like that. If you just want to get in and kill stuff for your first game, don't play a spellcaster. Play some sort of martial class, which we'll comment on some of the other ones
Yeah.
going on here.
Like it just it was I like to go against a lot of tropes, like
Sure.
the whole like with cleric. It'd be so fun to be like a life cleric, who keeps everyone up, but is kind of like that exasperated mom where she's like, if you fall into that tree and break both your legs, don't come running to me.
Yep. Yeah, that would be fun. Um, so clerics, the way they do their spells, and a couple other classes do this. They prepare them each day from the entire list of cleric spells. I do believe they get a couple other spells that they always know. Most of these prepared list classes have a couple that they know all the time. But other than that, they get to prepare their list each day. Um, there are pros and cons to this. We were talking about it earlier. I think that having that option of preparing your list every day, it may seem complex for a first time player, but it gives them that opportunity to experiment with different spells and not just be locked in. And so it's like, oh man, I made a bad decision picking this spell, and
Yeah,
now I'm stuck with it.
and when
Now a
we
good
said
DM will let them swap that out
yeah,
anyways because they're a first time player, so it's not as much of an issue. Um,
and and when we say you prepare your spells every day, you don't every session have to say, all right, these are the spells I need, or else I need to prepare all the and add these back in, or else I'm not going to have any spells. Like whatever you had yesterday are the spells you'll have today, unless you decide to change them.
unless you decide to change them, yeah. It's you have a certain number of spells that you're able to have prepared, and you can change them every long rest. If you find a set of spells that you like, you can literally just stick with those and just add new ones whenever you level up and get access to learn new and get access to higher spell levels.
That's what I do with
Um,
Talamh because I've on purpose limited like the variety of spells that I can
mhm.
cast.
With Ridire, I apart from a couple times early on, I don't prepare any of the smite spells, which like cuts a third of the paladin spells off the list and makes it really easy to pick which ones I want.
But like,
Um,
why would you cast a smite spell when you can smite?
well, I mean, there's benefits to it because some of them do extra effects. Like there's one that's makes them catch on fire. They do some different damage types, things like that. But honestly, I think you know what, when we get to paladin, I'll talk about
Yeah.
it. I mean, pick your poison if you're going to play a spellcaster for your first character, or you're helping someone build their first character. If they don't want to have to worry about the looking at spells a lot and stuff like that, a bard or a sorcerer or someone that just knows their spells is a fine choice. If they find that they have a spell that's like not helping them at all, just maybe work with them to let them swap it out for another
Yeah.
one at the same level. The rules already kind of say you can do that when you level up anyways. I tend to be real lenient with that rule, and basically I let people, if they're like I never use this spell, it doesn't fit for my character. I mean, we tend to play a little bit loosey goosey with that kind of stuff of like, if we think this fits your character better, let's just swap it out, because we're about trying to make the best version of your character, right? Not necessarily like stats wise or anything, but like the best role play, the thing that fits the character the best. So like Ridire originally had the protection fighting style. I used it a few times in combat. It I have so many different things I can do with my reaction that once I hit level 7, it almost became useless because I was much more likely that I was going to take the damage for you rather than invoke disadvantage on the person. Um, so Chuck let me switch to and it was also a new fighting style that got dropped in, I should say, with Tasha's as well, because we didn't have Tasha's when we first started the campaign, which kind of dates me makes me realize how long we've been playing. Um, but there was one that lets you take a couple of cleric spells, and we felt like that was much more appropriate for Ridire because he is more the healer support kind of side of things. So if you're DMing, or you have your good DM that's willing to kind of help you shift those kinds of things like that, that makes spellcasters a lot more accessible for first time players. So once again, I mean, if you're playing just core like by the book rules, I think cleric's probably a little bit easier than bard. Um,
Okay.
so okay,
All right.
we kind of went on a
Next,
long tangent there. What's your next one?
druid.
That is correct. It is
Okay.
druid. Um, I think druids kind of fall alongside clerics pretty similarly. They prepare their spell lists in a very similar way. I think druids might have more appeal to first-time players because wild shape is really fun.
Wild
Um,
shape is fun, and I don't even do it.
yeah, and Circle of the Moon druid, like we kind of were commenting on earlier, really is like one of the go-to druid subclasses. Not that the other ones are bad. There's some other ones that can do some really cool stuff. But if you're not wanting to really delve into a lot of stuff, you just like I want to be a wild Circle of the Moon druid, turn into big animals and kill stuff.
What
So
else makes them good for beginners is the level of armor they can have.
yes,
So clerics have access to heavy armor, and I think the highest you can get on their own as a druid is like 16 by wearing like I think studded leather, maybe just
might be
regular
something
leather
like that.
because they can't wear metal, and a shield.
Hmm. So yeah, um,
But still, that's higher level. That's higher armor than what a wizard gets access to.
yeah, that's true. And that also makes me I should kind of comment back on barbarian a little bit. Barbarians get their unarmored defense,
Yes.
and monks get a version of it as well. They're just slightly different between the two of them. That is kind of nice for low level characters because especially if you're playing in a more strict sense by the rules, taking on and off armor takes time and stuff like that. We hand wave a lot of it with Ridire just because if we really got into the minutia of that, we'd have to get into the minutia of a lot of things and would really bog down the gameplay a lot.
He really only doesn't have armor on when it's funny.
Exactly. And I mean, definitely like when we get attacked in the middle of the night, when we're out on the road, I assume that he keeps it at least partially on. But when we're like in an inn, it's much more likely he's going to take it all the way off. So we just tend to kind of not worry about the fatigue rules of sleeping in armor because, in my opinion, that kind of it makes it
Yeah.
it's if you want to play with that minutia and stuff and you really want to go into like all of those specifics and that survivability and stuff, that's super cool. It's a perfectly legitimate way to play. I would not even be opposed to playing in a campaign like that. But that's something that needs to be well established going in. Everyone needs to know what to expect. In any case, the barbarians don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So that's a good benefit to them for first-time players. But I think druids, similar to clerics, they're not the first one I would recommend. But if someone's interested in playing a spellcaster for the first time, I would probably recommend druid above cleric, but only by a tiny bit. But just I feel like getting the opportunity to do that wild shape and stuff is going to be a lot more entertaining for a first-time player, and it's going to get them a lot more invested in the game, I think. So,
All right.
yeah, that's my thoughts on druid.
So next, I think is fighter.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, fighter.
Great for
the default class of Dungeons and Dragons.
They're the Soldier 76 of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep. Fighters are good. There's not a lot you have to worry about keeping track of, but then once you've gone a couple of levels, if you're getting real confident in the game, they have a lot of variety in subclasses that really lets you experiment with stuff. The Battle Master lets you do a lot of cool different things. You can be an Eldritch Knight if you want to experiment with some spell casting. The Echo Knight does some really cool stuff. Like fighter's a very good choice. And the best part is, like, you could have everyone in the party. Like, you have 5 new time players. They could all play a fighter, and then by the time you hit level 3, actually even from the very beginning because of the way you build and the weapons you choose, but like by the time you hit level 3, now each of them is playing a vastly different character.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Fighters, Teenage
Mutant
Ninja Fighters.
So you could totally have a party of all fighters, and yet everyone could still be playing a character in a very different way.
Turtle Fighters.
I think that versatility makes them a very good. That simplicity and versatility makes them a very good choice for first-time players. But
all right.
I don't know if you have anything else to add on that. That's my opinion on that.
I'm just playing I'm just trying to see how many I remember in a row, and I'll let you do some of the spiels on them.
Okay.
All right. So next, I think it jumps quite a few letters up to monk, maybe. Or am I missing something?
No, you're correct. It does jump to monk. Monk's another one that I think is a really good choice. We talked about the barbarians' unarmored defense. Monks get a version of that as well.
Yeah, but I'll put it this way: for monks, you will not play a monk the same way you would play a fighter.
That is very true. They still have a very different feel, but I think it's still a very accessible and easy to understand character. The key points and the usage of that makes them 3% more complex than a fighter from level 1, but like if you picked a Battle Master fighter, it's no more complex than that.
Yeah.
Monks get a lot of just passive abilities and things they can do, which can be a little bit harder to keep track of. But someone that's interested in playing that kind of character is probably going to be excited about those things, like the ability to catch arrows out of the air and stuff like that. That's something they're going to be excited to do. So it's not going to be hard to remember because you want to be that guy that just snatches the arrow out of the air, right? So I think they're a pretty good choice for first-time players.
You get a lot of movement speed, and for monks, I think it's more about like getting around the battlefield and just using that to like open up opportunities for yourself for like the squishy characters. You don't want to be up in the thick of it necessarily, but you do want to be hitting things.
Any character benefits from really tactically looking at the battlefield. Monks benefit a lot from that tactical appraisal of the battlefield because their mobility lets them really take advantage of it.
Monks are great at forcing concentration saves on casters.
Yes, they are very good at pushing those back lines and stuff.
Because when you hit level 5 and you get your second attack, you can make 4 attacks in one turn, and assuming they all hit, that's 4 separate concentration checks that the enemy wizard has to make.
And well, you also at that level have stunning strike.
That too,
which means you could attempt to stun them, and they have to make a wisdom save, I think it is, or whatever her con save.
I believe it's something. I don't know off the top
Yeah.
of my head because I don't get to do it. But
Another thing about monks, which also actually works for clerics and druids that we didn't bring up before, is although monks are dexterity based for their combat, they're wisdom based for their other stuff. And wisdom, I don't want to say is the most important stat in D&D, but wisdom governs over perception, which might be the most important ability check in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Because it's the one that you're going to use the most frequently.
Oh my god.
And as we've seen in our campaign a lot, having two characters with crappy perception checks does not help the party at all. And it's a good thing we have a little blind girl with us.
She's not so little anymore.
That's true. We would get ambushed constantly without Talamh. Wisdom, those classes, by the fact that they play into wisdom heavily, even if you don't take proficiency in perception, they're going to give you that bonus to perception, which for earlier low-level characters is going to, for new players, is going to be very good to have, because it allows you to basically get the DM to give you more information. Insight's also a good one for that. I think insight is based off of, is insight wisdom as well, or is insight intelligence?
Insight is also wisdom.
Insight's also wisdom. So
investigation is intelligence.
That's right. Investigation is intelligence.
Sorry. The good way to distinguish between these two, and it's actually an example straight out of the DMG, is perception will allow you to see that an area of the wall is free of dust, but investigation and intelligence will allow you to infer that, hey, that's probably a secret door.
Gotcha. So they, in a lot of instances, there will be overlap in how they work, and people will just choose the one that they're better with.
Yeah.
We tend to, I use investigation a lot more on, like, I allow time to have passed with an investigation check. So it's about a person's ability to just gather information, whereas perception is much more just what do I see in the immediate area, you know. But there's a lot of nuance to how you can do those. In any case, perception is a very useful skill to have. I'm not going to say you have to have a character with a high perception. Ridire has a terrible perception, and he's still a very fun character to play. But if you have a party with no one with perception, just be ready to be in lots of fights. Ambushes are going to happen a lot more frequently, or at least the potential for them is going to be much heavier. So those wisdom-based classes for a first-time player get a slight boost because of that, I think. So, but yeah, Monk's a good one. The one last thing I'll say about Monk is, like, if you don't want to have to worry about tracking your equipment, play a Monk. All right. You don't need armor. You don't need weapons. You just punch stuff.
All right. So next, I want to say Paladin.
You are correct. Next
all right.
Is Paladin. Paladin might be my favorite class. It's up there. I say bards are like the best, but I don't know if bards are actually my favorite class. My top three is definitely Paladin, Bard, and Warlock. I don't know which one's in the first place spot. Paladin is definitely leaning on it. I think Paladins are a tiny bit more complex than your fighters, your barbarians, your monks. But I still think they're a very good option for a first-time player because they get to do a little bit of everything. Paladins are good martial characters. They get spell casting. Their spell casting is more combat focused, but they still get support spells as well. So you get to experiment as being a combat caster a little bit and a support caster, a little bit more leaning towards support caster because they don't get any of the really big, like, evocation spells. But they get that. So their magic is charisma based, so they can be a good face of the party.
As we've
especially
seen.
Especially if you build into it. The biggest problem that they have is that you're trying to balance more stats as a paladin than as others, because you need charisma for your spellcasting
and strength and con.
You probably need strength unless you build them dexterity based, but you still need either strength or dexterity, and then you need con because they want those higher hit points. So trying to keep 3 stats up high means one of them is probably going to be worse than the others. So in most instances, people build a paladin, they focus a bit more towards the combat. Their charisma is going to be worse. So that means they're not going to be as good at doing those spells that require saving throws and things like that. But they get a whole bunch of smite spells. They get a whole bunch of auras and things like that that do not require saving throws. So you can just have your lower charisma and just choose the spells that don't require people to make saving throws against you and don't base anything off of that stuff, and you're going to be fine. Ridire is built charisma heavy and low strength because he's a redemption paladin, which means his spell casting is a lot stronger than your average paladin would be, but his combat isn't as good. I don't want to talk about multi-classing much for first-time players because it's not something that they should necessarily have to think about unless they want to. But the thing that fixes all paladins is Hexblade Warlock. So I will just add that in real briefly.
I multi-classed for my first 5e character.
That's true, you did. And there's nothing wrong with it, and it really can help if you have a specific character idea in mind. It can really help you do that.
Fortunately, it was Monk, which is super easy because it's all passive bonuses.
Exactly. Well, it's Monk and Druid, which they're both wisdom based, so they mesh well with that. And as we've discussed before, they're both pretty good first-time player options. But you weren't a complete first time with D&D,
but
just to 5th edition.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too bad of a shift for you comparatively. A completely brand new player, multi-classing might be a little bit more intimidating. Mm-hmm. But if you're starting at level 1, you're not going to multi-class until at least level 2 anyways. So you'll have a little bit of a chance to get some of that.
Right.
Yeah, Paladin's a good pick because they do a little bit of everything. And you can always just lean on smites if you don't want to do the other spell casting. So they're definitely pretty easy to play.
Then there's Rogue, I want to say.
Ranger.
Oh, well, that's what I'm forgetting because Ranger's apparently so forgettable.
Rangers in 5th edition are very. There's a lot of debate. Yeah, they've fixed Ranger up somewhat in like Tasha's Cauldron and stuff like that. They've definitely made Beastmaster Ranger better, but I still feel like Rangers are a lot weaker overall than they should have been. It's hard to build a Ranger up to be able to do stuff quite as well as a lot of the other classes can. They can still be very fun to play, especially at low level, because at low level they're going to be awesome at being your ranged damage dealer in the back with a bow or whatever. So if you're just playing like a module up to level 5, absolutely play a Ranger if you want to. They get to dabble in spellcasting, which is wisdom based, so that's good for them, but they tend to be dexterity based fighters, so those are going to be stats there. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about Rangers. I've played a Ranger in 5th edition. I had a lot of fun with it, but I think we only made it to level 3.
Well, that's probably why you had so much fun.
Yeah, like I said, the low-level Ranger can do quite a bit. And that was just the Player's Handbook Ranger. That wasn't with any of the tweaks that have come out since then. When I build Rangers now, I tend to use the updated stuff, and they have a lot of optional rules now that allow you to kind of customize them a bit. So they're better than they used to be. Definitely not a bad choice for a first-time player because they're not needlessly complex, but if you are planning on playing in a long-running campaign, you're probably going to feel like you're dragging behind the other players with a Ranger. So I wouldn't recommend them, but I would gladly help someone build a Ranger that's going to be as competitive as possible.
And then there's Rogue.
Rogues are awesome. Rogues are great. If you want to be a sneaky character, Rogue's your guy. They get all the skill expertises. They get, they can do everything. It's a debate whether the Rogue or the Bard is better at skill checks at low levels. Because Bard gets Jack of all trades, which means they get a whole bunch of bonuses and everything. But Rogue gets at level 10
reliable talent.
They get reliable talent, which means all of their skill proficiencies, they don't fail skill checks.
I rolled a 2, but actually it's a 39.
But actually, yeah, exactly. So reliable talent makes rogues your best skill-based characters, and definitely if they multi-class bard and they take like feats that give them more skill proficiencies, they become insane.
We should just do that.
Um,
I want to make a character that's just the skilled character.
that would be a fun one to build. I want to build a character that takes all of the feats that give you extra spells and just get as many spells as possible.
And then yeah,
Um,
you could do this. You could do the spell character. I'll do
I'll
like
do the
the ones that
spell,
just
you do the
lets me
skill.
every chance I get, I just get
Yeah.
more skills.
Yeah, rogues and bards both get some expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So you do a couple levels of bard to get theirs. You do a whole bunch of levels of rogue to get all of theirs, and to get the
Okay.
reliable talent.
So if we do this
Yeah,
again, let's try to theory craft like the most skilled character we can make.
that would be fun. Um, but yeah, rogues I think are really good. You don't have to worry too much about. I mean,
You don't have to worry about resources. Rogues don't
you don't
care
have to worry
about
about
short rests.
resources. The yeah the biggest thing with rogue is you have to understand the advantage rules a little bit better than your average character to be able to use that to get off your sneak attack, because that's the most important thing a rogue can do combat wise, is get into an advantageous situation to use their sneak attack. It's not hard to do. The game really does help you do it quite easily if you know what you're doing. Um, it's just that little bit of, you need to be thinking about the battlefield a little bit more, kind of like we were talking about with the monk.
I'm gonna sneak
Um,
attack from 100 yards away with a longbow.
they technically can, because they can use ranged
Uh huh.
weapons. So, although I don't think most rogues can use longbows, so it'd probably have to be a short bow.
Eh,
Because
well,
longbows are technically heavy weapons too. Did you know that? So they have a strength requirement.
really.
Yeah, I believe you have to have 13 strength to properly use a longbow, if I'm correct. Um,
Hmm.
I could be thinking of that slightly wrong, but I think it does have the heavy classification. So at the very least, a smaller character couldn't use it as well. Um, but in any case, rogues I think are still very good for first time players. Um, you just have to kind of figure out the advantage rules well, so you can use your sneak attack. Each rogue subclass has different ways that they can use their sneak attack, so you'll just want to make sure this is a class where it's always important for any class, but this is a class where it's very important to keep in mind what your character can do. It's always important for you to be thinking about, what is my character capable of. For rogues, since they rely so heavily on sneak attack, it's much more important. If a paladin forgets to smite on every attack, not that big of a deal. If a rogue isn't sneak attacking every turn that they can, then your rogue is going to feel like they're not doing anything. When they are getting those sneak attacks off every turn, your
Oh.
rogue is probably going to feel like the biggest damage output character in the party, apart from the wizard throwing fireballs and hitting 6 targets. Uh,
And the fighter
it's
attacking like 50 times.
Yeah, but high level sneak attack damage
Ah,
from rogue, I
true.
think they still have some of the best single target damage in the game. Um, so yeah, rogues are awesome. Definitely a good choice for first time players.
So
Um,
I want to say after Rogue comes Sorcerer.
Let me go to my list I'm looking at. Yes, you are correct.
And
Um,
okay, Oliver
Oliver is sorcerer. Yep.
and Rogue now.
And rogue. Yeah. I do not think sorcerer is a good choice for first time player.
You got to worry about
Um,
meta magic. You
they are a great spellcasting class. I love sorcerers. They're charisma based. It's awesome. They, even though they just get their set list of spells, their meta magics, their different sorcerer subclasses make them have a lot of stuff to be keeping track of. If you're not now, meta magic isn't make or break. If you don't use it a lot, it's not going to kill your character, because you still get a lot of those really great spells. I think sorcerers get the most cantrips of any class, so you can have a lot of combat cantrip options, which gives you a lot of ways to change your damage types up and stuff.
yeah.
Um, but I just feel like the way their different subclasses work makes them more complex than other spellcasters.
Makes sense.
Um, Once again, any class is still a viable option as a first-time player. If you feel confident and you have a good DM, you're going to do just fine. But if you're feeling a little bit uncertain about spell casting specifically, I would not pick a sorcerer. I'd go with a cleric, druid, something like that first to learn how the spell to get yourself familiarized with the spell casting. If it's something you're a little bit uncertain about. If you feel confident about it, absolutely go for like a sorcerer or a bard or something. But they wouldn't be my first suggestion.
And then there is Warlock.
Warlocks, another possible contributor for my favorite class in D&D.
I've never played a 5th Ed Warlock.
Warlocks use magic differently than any other class. They are built to multi-class. Warlocks have a very strong early game, a very weak mid game, and a very strong late game. So if you're playing core Warlock in mid game, you're probably going to feel like you're not contributing as much unless you play a Hexblade Warlock. Hexblade Warlock fixes everything in D&D. They are probably one of the best subclasses in the entire game, as far as being able to do a lot of different stuff at once. So that's the class that kind of fixes the Warlock. All of the subclasses still have good options. They're a really great choice if you're interested in trying out multi-classing. They're a very good pick for that because they don't have to worry about the crazy combining spellcasting rules that other spellcasters do when multi-classing, so they make that really simple. If you're trying to learn how spellcasters work, they're maybe not the best pick because they use spellcasting so differently than other classes and they don't get a lot of spell slots. So if you're like, I want to play a caster so I can learn and get confident with the spellcasting system, Warlock's probably not the best option.
I'd go cleric or druid or something.
I'd go cleric or druid or something to learn the system. But if you have a good idea of how it's going to work, or you're not super worried about the spellcasting and you just want the best damage cantrip in the game, play a Warlock.
Well, I just want to Eldritch Blaze things.
Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast is the best damage cantrip in the game, and they get it at level 1. They're the only class that gets it. Anyone else has to use like Magic Initiate to get it. So.
But I want it.
Yeah, everyone wants it. So yeah, Warlocks definitely not a bad option. I love Warlocks. I would not push someone towards them that is a little bit unsure about what they're going to do. But I would gladly help someone build the best Warlock they can to give them the best opportunity. If you are playing a Warlock, and I actually have a friend at work who is a new time D&D player. He's going to be playing in my campaign I'm starting, and he tells me about his other campaign, and he played a Warlock. And I was like, dude, Warlock's my favorite. Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, yep. If you build your character to just max out your Eldritch Blast, you're playing a good character. That doesn't mean you have to do that to play a good Warlock, but that means your character is going to be competent. And so if you build it around Eldritch Blast, you're going to do just fine in any campaign.
It's like Magic Missile, but a cantrip.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep.
All right. And then last,
they wouldn't be my first choice, but they're a good option.
And then last is Wizard.
Last is Wizard. I have never played a 5th edition Wizard.
I haven't either. I will be perfectly honest.
I don't want to harp on it as saying it's a bad class or anything like that, because I have played with some people that have played Wizards. There's a lot of awesome stuff you can do with Wizards. Wizards get some really unique abilities based on their specific school of magic that can make them very, very powerful in that particular school of magic.
If I was going to play a Wizard, I'd probably want to do like an Abjuration Wizard.
They get some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I don't, and this is just a personal preference, I don't like the spellbook mechanics.
Yeah.
It's an extra layer of complexity from the whole preparing your spells list thing that clerics, paladins, and druids do.
Okay. Here's a cool concept for a spellbook though. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen How to Train Your Dragon TV show?
I've only seen like the main couple of
Okay.
movies.
All right. They're in Dragon's Race to Edge. It's basically like this kaleidoscope thing, and they like twist it, and they put different like lenses and stuff in it to like find the different dragons. Having like that kind of like thing would be really cool as like a replacement to your spell book. Just
Mm, yeah.
so you can
I
you can get creative with the book mechanic and have it not
you
just
can.
be a book, or you can be
True.
like Morian and just smack people with it.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, there's nothing wrong with wizards inherently. I would not recommend them for a first time player because they probably have the most complicated rules for spell preparation.
They are high
Um,
maintenance.
and they have the lowest hit dice. It used to be that sorcerers and wizards were both equally squishy. Sorcerers have a D8 hit dice in 5th edition.
What? So is it
Um,
just wizards now who are D6?
Wizards are the only ones with a D6 in 5th edition.
Didn't they used to be like
Um,
D4 in 3.5 or
yeah,
something
and
like
like
that?
3.5, I think they were D4, and I think sorcerers were also D4. I think
Ugh.
most spellcasters were really weak. Um, Wizards are very, very squishy. They don't get any armor. There is the what is it the Blade Singer subclass if you're an
Yeah.
elf that lets them be a little bit better at close combat. Some people like have tons of praises to sing for the Blade Singer. I'm like, if you want to play that kind of character, make a Hexblade. I feel like the Hexblade does the same thing better. They can take a lot of the same spells. They just don't get a couple of the extra bonuses that the Blade Singer gets. But
Take a wizard
um,
though if you are planning on going against, oh, I don't know, a bunch of illithids and you need the int saves.
true. Um, but then you can always take the Resilient feat for intelligence.
Well, but you'll have high intelligence for better
You will have
saves.
high intelligence already. Wizards do have the largest list of spells. So if you want the most access to spells of like what you can get, but the problem is they have to learn them, put them in their spell book, and then prepare from their list in their spell book. And you only get a couple of spells every level. They do have the added benefit of being able to learn spells when they find scrolls and things like that. So your DM can work with you to help you find those spells.
Now, can they
And
only learn wizard spells or can they learn like anybody's spells?
they can only put wizard spells in their spell book. That is the thing
Okay.
that it specifies. So any spell that is not on the wizard list, they cannot put in their spell book. They can only get through things like magic initiate and stuff like that, which will then have it be a spell that you always have prepared, which is kind of nice.
But
Um,
you'll have to learn. You'd have to work with your DM to like have enemies that have these spells that you can learn and prepare.
yes. Um, a a really good DM would maybe waive the wizard spells only rule and allow you to transcribe any spell in there. You still just have to find them and you have to spend the time and money to put it into your spell book.
Yeah, but like, what not wizard is writing down their spells?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're relying on spell scrolls, which are mostly probably going to be wizard spells for the most part. So
But yeah,
that's a
if you
very
can
good
get
point.
them,
That's a
then
very
I
good
would
point.
let you have them.
Yes. So yeah, wizards, and that's actually speaking because you referenced Morian. That's Chuck's character in the Black Label campaign. I made a specific subclass for him that allows him to pick any spell. That's one of the bonuses it gets. So it does kind of address that we've just been discussing.
He can pick
Um,
any necromancy spell because that's all he's gonna do.
he's focusing a lot on necromancy, but he has access to anything. I mean, that allowed him to take Eldritch Blast,
What?
which yeah. So he has Eldritch Blast.
Wait.
Um,
What?
yep.
What?
So
Oh my
that's
god.
what hey he can I made this up that he can take any spell. That was his thing. It's like at third level, it allows him to pick any spell. That's the only thing he gets at third level. He gets
Ah,
no
well.
other bonus. He just gets access to any spell in the book, in the books, in the game. So,
I'm gonna take Meteor Swarm at third level.
yeah, well, no, he's still limited by his spell levels and slots and stuff. He just doesn't have to worry about just the wizard list.
Oh, so he doesn't get to cast
So,
Wish.
yeah, he can potentially take Wish when he gets 9th level spells
I
at
wish
level
that I could cast
17.
a Meteor Swarm.
That's what Wish can do. So yeah, nothing against wizards conceptually. I honestly don't know that I will ever play a 5th edition wizard. unless I do some sort of thing where someone assigns me a character, or I do have fun building characters without me choosing the class and race and stuff like that. So like if we had to do a one shot and someone was like, "Hey, you have to build a gnome wizard and play it," then I would gladly do it. But wizard just isn't my thing. About the only thing I could see myself wanting to build a wizard was if I really wanted that wise old sage guy, you know. But I'm kind of
Gandalf.
getting that with but I'm kind of Gandalf's not a wizard.
Not according to Dungeons and Dragons, he's not.
Dungeons and Dragons rules, Gandalf's a sorcerer,
Uh,
or maybe a bard. But I would call him a celestial sorcerer. So, that's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of debate you can go into that kind of thing to build your character, but yeah, wizard's not the best choice for a first-time player, in my opinion.
all right.
Yeah, we've gone through all of them there. Hopefully people gleaned some fun information out of that.
Look at yourself, sitting around gawking at letters on pages. Must be real easy with your head full of eyeballs.